Welcome back, live from ETH Denver, kind of. We are in Denver. We're not at the castle right now, as you can see, because I didn't have time to wait in a 2-hour line this morning. But these guys were smart and checked in a day early, and
I'm not either. I'm in the same boat.
You're in the same boat as me. Craig was smart. Craig's a smart one. As I mentioned in the previous episode just a little while ago, we are starting a weekly thereabouts crowdcast with Messari's engineering team and developers, just talking about different kind of key themes, trends in the industry. We'll be kind of diving into products eventually, I'm sure. But we want to start with some foundational elements and obviously introduce a little bit of the design ethos and philosophy that we have at Messari and some of the products that we're working on, how they're assembled, how we think about hacking, and then hopefully give some insights for what's going on this weekend and maybe some inspiration from people that have been building in the trenches in Web3 for the last couple of years. Diran, our VP of Engineering, joins me again for this particular episode. You all know me or maybe know me at 2-Bit Idiots, the fearless leader that doesn't code but can at least talk to coders. And then Craig, who actually I'm meeting for the first time in person. I think we've spoken for about 3.5 minutes before we're going live on camera here, physically in the same room, and we've been together for 18 months. Yep. Craig's been an amazing front-end lead for us at Messari, so we're going to talk about a lot of the tools that we've built. How do we get these crazy real-time feeds to stay up and live so you can get your dopamine hits when you're on the Messari front page by seeing the blinking lights, and then all sorts of tools that have had massive leveling ups since you joined, between the screener, the charting interface, the asset pages, and whatnot. So hopefully this is good inspiration for some of the front-end developers around town this week. Why don't we start out, though? I'll ask you the same question I asked Diran, just to get a little bit of sense of your background and just general journey into Web3 and full-time into crypto.
Yeah, sure. So my full journey was that I kind of started out hobbyist coder very early on. Dived straight into coding. Worked through agencies a lot. Dabbled in product work a little bit, but Messari is kind of the first company that I've really dedicated myself to on a full-time product. And in terms of crypto, it was 2017. I got in with the big ICO boom. Everyone's talking about it at work, that sort of thing. Started kind of researching some of the technologies. Some interesting ones, some questionable ones. Spent a bit of time researching 0x, and that was probably my launching kind of pad into crypto, kind of full time, like dedicating to a side project. So built out 0x tracker, tracking the trading data on the 0x protocol, and that was a side project that I ran for 2-3 years, something like that.
One of the reasons I'm so excited to have this conversation immediately after the first conversation is in many ways, not just in terms of role at Messari, you're like a mirror image to Diran. We talked about big tech, big data, Web3. You were agency, hacking, Web3. But the commonality is you also had an offer that we couldn't refuse. Diran, when we were just chatting, said he had an offer that some of the early Web3 startups couldn't refuse, which was he had that big tech pedigree, and then he would just say, I'll hack away on the weekends for free just to learn and roll up my sleeves. That's a hell of an offer. You, on the other hand, built an actual functional product that I think a lot of people used, and I just remember we looked at 0x Tracker and we were like, I wonder how big that team is. I wonder if we could acquire them or whatever. And then we realized it was just you, and we're like, let's get them on board, right? So talk a little bit about just because I think this will resonate with a lot of people this weekend. How you get started with something like 0x Tracker when you're just really interested in the end subject. You've got a little bit of time on the side since you were doing agency work, and you saw a gap in the market and something that you'd be able to cobble together full stack really, but with an eye for the visualization side of things.
Yeah. So I think initially it was just it was a curiosity. I thought the concept was interesting. You had the trading data on chain; it's there forever. But there was no real visualization around what's actually going through the protocol, what's the volume that's going through there, what's being traded, that sort of thing. You really had to kind of drill into the on-chain data yourself. So I just kind of saw it as a challenge, technical challenge, to learn a bit more about Ethereum, how to get data off the chain. I hadn't really done too much work in the back end in terms of like data processing before in my career. I've always been sort of more focused on the front end side of things. So yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge for me, is just how do I deal with time series data in an efficient way. And that was a long journey of trial and error, trying new things, failing, trying again. So yeah, that was kind of the journey in, and it was just a very iterative process. So started out very basic. It was just a table of data. The first iteration, then adding various charts on there, volume, splitting out by assets, breaking down by different integrators with the 0x protocol, the different apps that are integrating. And just kind of iterating a lot over numerous years.
So let that be a lesson to anyone that's hacking away full stack. If you really like the front end, don't like the back end, and you're just doing it because you have to, or vice versa, then we can take one of those sides of the equation off your hands. I do think it's really interesting to think about this. For a lot of developers are probably going to go through a similar decision point in the next couple of months, if they're a free agent or they're looking to get into Web3 from Web2 or wherever they are. And that is, there's so much money floating around. Like, do I start something or do I join something that's going to grow really, really quickly? And there are obvious trade-offs. We've talked about on the data side, what it takes to get critical mass and how difficult that is, and how much faster you might be able to go if you can assemble like a 1 and 1 is 3 team, to the nth power for however many people you bring on. But how did you think about 0x tracker versus like broader products that might be accessible across assets, across different applications, and just what joining a team like Messari would do from a velocity standpoint, getting this out to market and in front of users?
Yeah, I think like the biggest limitation for me working on the project was just, it's an open source project. It had limited scope. It was 0x protocol. It's tracking data on there. Kind of evolved. They integrated with Uniswap, SushiSwap, other bridges, but the scope is very small. Messari's doing something similar, but on a much larger scale, and the fit there, it felt good. It's like it's a similar problem space. It's a space that I'm interested in. I think there's a lot of interesting tech, so it kind of made sense as a natural progression. I think I'm personally more interested in technology than business, running a business myself. So taking the project from something that's like a curiosity, a learning platform for myself, towards like a full-time business just wasn't something that really ever interested me.
I think that's true for a ton of people. I wasn't even speaking so much to the entrepreneurial element. That's certainly one part of it. But then the other part is, and this is not just true for data, I think it's true for a lot of infrastructure companies, right? It is very difficult to carve out a niche, build around that niche, and then kind of build a platform, right? And so very often even though there is a lot of seed financing around, and I think we're at maybe the best time ever to be an entrepreneur, at least in that very early stage. How do you get to the viability stage? How do you get to the scaling stage? I think those challenges still persist for people. So it's kind of individual by individual basis, and clearly I think it's worked out so far for everybody. So I want to talk about the front end in particular, and maybe I'll let Diran kind of lead these questions, because he's going to basically ask you how you fixed everything that you broke the first couple of years. So I'll let him do that instead of it coming from me.
Yeah. So when Messari, when you joined, if you were to break down the front end, there's clearly a spectrum of issues. One is the more harder engineering side of things, of, hey, you have these frameworks that you need to integrate with, and you have all of this data underneath that you need to make sense of. And then two, on the other side of the spectrum is the UI UX side of things. And how do you make a consistent UI UX experience? Can you break down, starting from the data side of things and from the making sense of the framework side of things, what were some of the challenges there, and how you came about sort of solving that unification of the framework?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing for me, like when you're coming into a new company, into a new product, is like understanding the domain very well. So it's a continual learning process. Like you're constantly talking to people within the company just to understand things at a high level and then drill down into specifics. So I think my personal process is like breaking the product down into distinct features, thinking about them individually and then thinking about how they connect together. Messari kind of has a lot of that in terms of the different features we have. We have governor, we have research, we have intel, we have metrics, charts, and we kind of tie them together at the moment through assets, starting through exchanges, protocols, governor, that sort of thing. So it's really just kind of, it's getting down and just trying to absorb as much information as possible. And then taking that platform and looking for kind of commonalities amongst features. What's common, what's not, where should we have consistency in the UI, and where should we kind of veer off because the context is different enough. And just kind of going down that path. Yeah,
for the hackers out there, what are some of the toolings that have been helpful that we use on the front end, and what are some of the learning lessons that have come with it?
Yeah, I think we work with TypeScript, React a lot. React is great for encapsulating logic, components, UI elements, and reusing them across the app. So as you're kind of breaking down the app into distinct parts and looking for commonalities, like React works very well encapsulating those common elements. So that's definitely that's foundational to what we do. I think GraphQL has played a big role in terms of how we work. We can break down in terms of the data that we're fetching. We can break things down very granularly, but we can also kind of we can set a high level in terms of pulling out data. I think probably it's all about components for me in terms of how we express the UI. So everything that branches off of React, how we work with React, working out of Storybook, for example, it lets us work in a more abstract way, thinking more about like what are the commonalities at a high level, building them out in a generic way so that we can then apply them across the products in various places.
Yeah, and in terms of creating a uniform theme, you've done a lot of work in making our experience uniform. You can have like the day mode, the night mode, but also the individual modules are very much consistent between each other, but also reusable in terms of the data that you want to display. I'm sure a lot of people building are going to have similar problems of, hey, maybe I just build one component and it's good. Maybe the second one is a lot of copy paste, but I don't want to copy paste like 10 times, 20 times. How do you break down that process of creating uniformity within the components that you talked about?
I think it's looking for those commonalities amongst like the different feature sets that we're looking at. So what is this particular feature trying to achieve? And from a UI perspective, like how do we want to do that? And you can break down a lot of our UIs into very similar ways. So we use a lot of tabulated data, for example. It's very common across the interfaces that we have. We started to like move towards common patterns there. Our tables are very similar across the product. They're representing different types of data, but in a kind of familiar way for users.
Mhm.
And we kind of go up from that level. We have a lot of filtering, sorting on the site. Again, it's very similar. So we're thinking about like how do we make that experience consistent across all of the different products, so that as the user navigates, it's to a new feature, maybe something that we're releasing out, like it's a familiar experience and they can dive straight in.
Now that you have a common experience, let's talk more around Web3.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of progress in terms of tooling around Web3. Can you talk about your experience from way back interacting with Web3, the various libraries that you've used? What's been that evolution from your perspective? One, and then two, what are some of the tooling that you recommend people using today?
I dabbled a little bit with 0x Tracker. I had a project on there where I was dabbling in advertising for monetizing the project, and I looked into a framework called micro-sponsors. So it was NFTs, time-based NFTs, and the idea was that you could tokenize an advert. It's for a particular slot of time, say a couple of weeks or a month, and then an advertiser could purchase that slot. If they felt like they wanted to transfer it somewhere else, they could sell it in a secondary market, right? So I kind of dabbled with integrating that into 0x Tracker. And the initial tooling I was working with MetaMask as the wallet integration. I didn't push too much past that. And I was working with Web3.js as well. Web3.js was interesting to work with. It was very new to me. The APIs were not familiar at all in terms of the types of concepts that I was working with in there. So that was a big kind of exploration for me. I found Web3.js tricky to work with, so the evolution from there was kind of moving towards Ethers.js, which I found is just a lot nicer to work with. It's a lot lighter weight than Web3.js. There's a lot of baggage that comes with Web3.js. A lot of the time it was conflicting with different modules in the project, and it was just it was kind of a maintenance nightmare. So Ethers has definitely improved that process for sure. That's what we're using for the Governor product in Messari. And then in terms of like wallet tooling, we've used so we're in the React ecosystem, and we're using a library called Use Wallet. We've kind of extended from there, built some of our own concepts over the top of it, but the foundation is Use Wallet, and that's built on top of Web3 React. So there's kind of these layers of libraries that are building up the interactions. Web3 React itself, I'm not sure what that's built on top of. Potentially Ethers. But Use Wallet makes it very easy to integrate with lots of different types of wallets. So for the Governor product itself, we have Coinbase Wallet, we have Wallet Connect, we have MetaMask, and integrating with all of those, they kind of have their nuances in terms of like what their APIs are, and Use Wallet has kind of made that a lot simpler to work with. I think some of the difficulties in there was in terms of persisting the wallet state over sessions. So we've had to build our own layer on top of Use Wallet to persist the connection over time. So when you come back to the Messari Governor product, you want to still be logged in. You don't want to have to log in every single time you're coming back. It's a bad user experience, right? So that's kind of been a little bit challenging, and I think some of the existing tooling is probably lacking there. There's a few other projects that are in the space, but they're very opinionated around the UX. You have Web3 modal, for example. It kind of forces you down a particular path in terms of your UX. Use Wallet is it's kind of lower level. It lets you have a lot more control over how things are presented to the user, whilst giving you those nice APIs that you can work with at a kind of higher level.
One thing to double click on here for those that haven't actually used the governor yet, they might be familiar with the homepage or the research that we have. Governor is a product that we shipped in beta in December, really focused on aggregating Web3 governance processes from proposal to snapshot, vote and signal to on-chain execution. And the wallet component that we're talking about is a connect wallet feature that allows people to not only vote their tokens if they have voting power, but ultimately delegate them as well. And so this opens up a ton of interesting applications beyond just governance and voting for us. So when we think about connecting wallets to our front end, a layperson, an idiot like me, would think, well, if you can connect your wallet with MetaMask or Coinbase Wallet, why can't I just plug that immediately into a watch list on Messari, or have an auto-populated screener, or have some type of ability to kind of like pull from the wallet at its current state, identify the tokens, and then automatically kind of port that over to our market intelligence or Web2 market intelligence platform, for instance. What are some of the challenges in connecting there? Is it back end? Is it kind of back end for front end, or is it just how do you elevate that and kind of parse the state that's being connected through something like Web3 use?
Yeah, I would say at the moment it's not something that we've taken on as a challenge. I think there's probably a number of challenges there, just in terms of how we categorize assets on our backends. We've been very focused around the assets themselves, but not necessarily how they relate to chains. So the metadata that you need to connect an asset to something in a smart contract on chain. We've kind of been missing that link a little bit, and we've been moving in the direction to make sure that those connections are there. But that's kind of one piece, because in the Web3 world, we're working with token addresses, and we have token addresses across different smart contract platforms, different blockchains, that sort of thing as well. So when you're connecting your wallet, we need to understand which assets you have inside of that wallet, which of the assets in here are tokens, and which of those tokens exist within the Messari space. And that, at the moment, that's a bit of a challenge for us. It's not a problem that we've solved.
Has anyone solved it or built that library? Maybe not going to be something that's solved in a weekend.
Yeah, not that I've seen. I think it will be interesting. We definitely need to integrate wallet connectivity into the product deeper. At the moment, we built out Governor, and we've very intentionally just kind of siloed our wallet connections to Governor. I think from a UI UX perspective as well, it's important for that to be there. So you go into the Governor product. In terms of connecting your wallet, it's just inside the Governor product. When you go out elsewhere on the Messari product, there's no concept of wallet connection there. And I think that's important, because we don't want to confuse people into thinking that, okay, I've connected my wallet, what else is going to be changing on Messari for me? So as we kind of integrate wallets deeper into the product, we can start to rethink that UI, that UX, and how we lift things like the wallet connection UX up into kind of the Chrome of the app, if you like, and start to integrate things like watch lists, integrating that deeper into things like research, intel, alerts, things that interest me based on what my portfolio is within my connected wallet.
Yeah.
If you're interested in solving that problem, both of these gentlemen are hiring. So
part of that problem is security also, right? In the Web2 world, if you do something wrong, or if the user does something wrong, you can just go into a database, revert it, and everything is good. But in the Web3 world, it's much harder to do that. So there's much higher stakes at play here of when someone does interact with your product and they make some action that we don't have control over that, and we don't want to have control over that. So there's a heightened level of testing around it, but also a heightened level of app design such that when a user is coming to governor and voting through our system or delegating to our system, or in the future personalizing their experience, want to make sure that we are not in a faulty state such that if, say, someone wants to vote yes, but the code is faulty and votes no, that's very bad. So what are some ways in terms of tooling, backend tooling, that we use to test to make sure that if something goes wrong, we're the first one to catch it in pre-alpha stage as opposed to a user catching it in production?
Yeah, we have a mix of, we have some automated testing in there at a low level. So as we integrate with smart contracts, we use Ethos.js to talk to smart contracts. We have a layer over the top of that is kind of the utilities or the services that we're talking to from our components. So we have a layer of automated testing. We use Jest for that, and Hard Hat to simulate an Ethereum environment. So we can test the inputs that we push through those services and make sure that we talk to the contracts in the way that we're expecting. We're not flipping Boolean values in the wrong way to vote yes when you meant no, that sort of thing. We have some manual UI testing on top of that. We have a storybook layer where we've kind of simulated lots of different workflows through the voting process and the delegation process. I think as we progress the product there, automating some of those UI testing flows will be important. That's something that we're doing manually at the moment, and I think we can grow that for sure. And Hard Hat specifically, I think that's been a very useful tool to us. So Hard Hat is the Ethereum simulation environment. You can quickly spin up a fork of the Ethereum blockchain. You can do that at any particular block, going back to block 0. And then you can use that in your testing. So it's typically used for testing smart contracts. If you're writing Solidity and building your own smart contracts, it's used for that. But we've also been able to use it on the front end to do some of that automated testing. And it's also helped with our manual testing as well. So you have the issues of you're working with transactions on chain if you're voting. Specifically through, we use Governor Alpha, Governor Bravo at the moment that we're supporting on chain. Those are transactions that need to be submitted to really test that end-to-end workflow. And that's tricky when there's gas costs involved, right? So we need to think about how can we constantly test these workflows without the gas being a barrier to our developers doing that. So Hard Hat's really helped there in terms of being able to simulate the environment that we're testing against. It's basically as good as we can get towards testing against Mainnet. It's tricky testing against the testnets. Some of the contracts that we're testing against just aren't deployed there. So that's kind of a tricky environment to test in. So really being able to test against Mainnet or a replica of Mainnet has made things a lot easier for sure.
So I think there's a nuance here, which is the forking of Mainnet versus Testnet. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, so the forking of Mainnet is essentially we're taking the state, the position that the Ethereum blockchain's in at a given point in time or at a given block. And we're saying, okay, at this point in time, we're now going to submit transactions to it. So Hard Hat makes it very, very easy to spin up that fork. If you want to do it yourself and you want to fork to a particular block without something like Hard Hat, then that's very tricky. Hard Hat makes it's super quick. You know, you can spin a fork up in seconds. So it's good for automated testing if you really want to run tests through end to end, going through our own TypeScript services and then hitting an Ethereum service. You can do that. And it allows us to impersonate accounts as well. So one of the problems is with governance specifically, you need assets to for a particular DAO or protocol. You need the assets to vote on the proposals that are coming through, and we're kind of going for like broad coverage, right? So that means covering a lot of different types of assets. So having those assets ourselves is somewhat impractical, especially when we're integrating new protocols. And also having those assets at a point in time when the proposal was created is also tricky. So we may think that we're testing from here, but we then need to wait for proposals to be created within the smart contract to actually test through that. So being able to go back in time, say, okay, this proposal was created on this block. We're going to test at this block, say 10 blocks later, and we're going to impersonate this account, which we know has the assets required to vote, is super useful, really, really useful.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of hurdles here on the on the backend tooling side of things, but also on the user experience side of things. It's fair to say that the user experience in Web3 is still very lackluster. There's in the previous session we talked about signing in with Ethereum, the security repercussions. There's also a lot of speed is a big one. What are your thoughts around navigating from a product perspective this world that is imperfect, but creating a much better guided user experience to the user? Is there anything that we can do?
Yeah, I think there's definite limitations on how far we can go. I think the UX around just the different ways you connect a wallet is lacking at the moment. We're kind of in that space where you go to a traditional website, even if you're logging in with your Messari account, you know, we have Google and we have our own username password login. A lot of sites you go to, you have Google, Twitter, Facebook logins, and then you have their username password. And you're kind of going down this track where you have lots of different types of services, and it's just kind of bad UX. It's centralized to particular providers. So we're trying to move away from that. But one of the issues that we have at the moment is that all of the wallet implementations in terms of how we connect to these wallets are slightly different. So how you connect to Coinbase, they use a protocol called Wallet Link. You also have Wallet Connect. They're confusingly similar in naming, but the implementation details are slightly different. So like I said earlier about Use Wallet, it makes it easier for us to integrate. They have connectors for working with different types of wallets, but from the user's perspective, there's still these very different flows, and especially with something like Wallet Connect. Wallet Connect is, I think it's hundreds of different wallets that it supports under the hood, but the user needs to know that their wallet is using the Wallet Connect framework or protocol. So if you're using something like Trust Wallet, then you connect with Wallet Connect, but you're not connecting with Trust Wallet, and you need to know that Trust Wallet is Wallet Connect. So,
sorry, finish the thought. I thought you were trailing off there.
Yeah, so I think it's just kind of, it's a little bit confusing at the moment. I think we're lucky that we're dealing with power users at the moment, and people that are very invested into the space. But as we move forward, like onboarding people that aren't power users is going to be tricky, and I think it's one of those foundational elements, like connecting your wallet. It should be a very foundational element, and it's something that we need to get right as an industry.
So I completely agree. There's another motivation for getting this right very quickly, which is maybe in DeFi or just in general from a regulatory standpoint, right? So we've seen different front ends like Uniswaps actively censor certain trading pairs based on what the centralized team that manages that particular domain name has received from a regulator. Sometimes in the U.S., sometimes abroad. We've seen other websites that are just not accessible within certain jurisdictions, period. So it's not necessarily which assets are available or like how you use the product, but it's just like geofenced, right? I would feel like this should be a like golden era for front-end developers, because all of the back end, like all of the complexity of the smart contracts is open source, and you have teams that are borderline begging for other people to build other front-end implementations and ways to access these systems. So, if you're thinking about either we could talk about maybe a broader project or some of the real missing pieces in Web3 that could use fresh coats of paint from a front-end standpoint, or just like some ideas for weekend hacks that would be low-hanging fruit. Where do you see some of the problems and like the clearest opportunities without creating like an Apple level design or super elegant solution that will onboard billion users to Web3? Just like basic, like stepwise improvements for, as you put it, like the professional users that are pretty familiar with like getting dirt under their fingernails playing with these things. What can help them or make it just even a little bit less painful, and that could be shipped pretty quickly?
Yeah, I think like solving this wallet connection problem, amazing. If people can get on board with that and push things in the right direction. Like ideally, we have one button. It's connect your wallet, and it's all kind of standardized. Like it's difficult to get there because you have to go through this innovation cycle. We're trying different things, and then we're converging upon something standard. But yeah, definitely pushing in that direction. I think another missing piece is notifications. That's a lacking part of the UX at the moment. Because
of a lack of wallet to wallet messaging capabilities, or
yeah, just
more?
I guess the foundational kind of model for how you interact with smart contracts. We work through transactions. So you submit a transaction and it will get processed or may get processed at some point in the future. We don't know when that will be. Depends how much you pay in gas. So it's different to how we do things at the moment in the traditional web world. We have a database on our back end, and typically if you do an action, it's saved down instantly and you have the feedback instantly somewhat. Whereas when we're working with smart contracts, it's you submit a transaction and it may not get processed for 10, 15 minutes. So notifying the user that actions have affected or have completed, have failed, what the outcome is from that. And then also notifying other services downstream as well in terms of the actions that they need to take. I think we're lacking there a little bit. We have to poll for on the back end. I guess it's more of a back end problem here in terms of like downstream services. But we're polling for state changes in the blockchain, testing whether transactions have completed, and then deciding what to do further on down the line. Notifying users is kind of a case of them just checking constantly. Which isn't great. Like we want people to be able to get on with their lives, and then we let them know a notification on their phone or an email, whatever their preferred choice is. So I think that's an area that definitely needs improvement. It's probably just as tricky as the wallet connection issues. They're probably my two big hitters at the moment in terms of improving the UX. I think we're generally the UX we have in Web2 at the moment works well. We've had years to refine what that looks like. Users are familiar with it. So being able to mirror what we have in the Web2 world in terms of UX inside of Web3 is going to be important. So it's looking for those opportunities. Where is there a gap where this is just abrasive for a user? Like where does it introduce some kind of barrier where they're are either feeling some pain or they don't quite understand what's going on. If there's any of those areas, that's something we need to focus on.
Said another way, the innovation in Web3 is at the database layer and how you open up access to that database versus the front end, which doesn't necessarily need to be reinvented from scratch, because there are established behaviors and expectations that users have. Even if that changes over time, certainly going to be true during the transition period. So, Diran, do you want to give the last word, and we'll see if there's any questions?
Well, to touch on the two aspects that you mentioned here, one is signing in and making sure that experience is uniform, because users are kind of spoiled from the Web2 experience of you just one click, single sign-on, you're signed into all of the websites that are associated with it. And the second one really boils down to performance. So no blockchain is fast enough at this point. Everything's too slow. From a user perspective, if you make an action, you have to wait way too long. And that has tremendous amount of downstream effect to the user experience. We've seen a lot of teams recently move towards layer 2 solutions. We see on the optimistic side, we also see from the ZK side. Do you think that changes the user experience? And if so, should developers change their development behavior accordingly?
I would say it's probably an area that I don't have enough experience in to really give like a good answer. I would hope so.
Does anyone?
I think, yeah. From what I understand, it's very experimental at the moment. So again, it's another Wild West where we're going to go through that innovation cycle of trying out things, failing, seeing what works, converging on a standard. I hope so. I hope it will help, especially on the cost side of things. Layer 1s become very, very expensive to work with, so it's just kind of a barrier for adoption. You want things to be cheap. If you're working in the governance world, and you want to vote on a proposal, you don't want to spend $200 to vote yes or no on something. Right. It needs to be cheap, and I think like we support Snapshot, the off-chain connected to the blockchain kind of world. And there's a lot more adoption there in terms of people voting, and it's clearly because it's cheap. You know, it's not binding. There's no change happening to smart contracts on the other end. It's still a very manual process after that. But in terms of like understanding consensus from members of your community, it works very well because it's cheap. And yeah, I think layer 2 can definitely help out there. But in terms of improving the UX, the speed, not too sure at this point.
Well, we'll have a follow-up conversation on ZK technology in one of these future discussions. So, Craig, last words of wisdom as a senior front-end developer that's developed some battle scars in this industry the last 4 years.
Yeah.
For those that only have 48 hours to learn everything that you know.
If you want to do things in 48 hours, you're going to struggle. But it's just a continuous process. Like, continue learning, continue trying out new things. If it's something that genuinely interests you, then like it's going to be easy. I think I've always enjoyed what I do, and for me it's a hobby. I'm lucky enough that I get to do my hobby every single day and get paid well for it. So just keep pushing for it. And if it's what you want to do, then there's people like Messari that are out here begging to employ you.
And I get to live my dream of shit posting for a living every day. So I will get back to that now that we've done this very professional, very valuable developer session here. We're going to do a lot more of these, as I mentioned. I hope that you will look for us and for anyone that's got the Messari M that Craig's rocking here. I'm going to have the hat on, the shirt on. I know we're going to be all swagged out, so it's a little bit easier for folks to find us. And we do not have a merch store. So if you see someone with a Messari M, they either work for us or you need to kill them and get it back. So with that said, I figured you'd enjoy that off camera. With that said, we're going to wrap for today. Back here tomorrow, we got 2 more sessions. We're going to get deep into Web3. talking about on-chain infrastructure and some of the things that people might be able to pull over the weekend from things like the Graph. And then we will be going into the wild world of DAOs and NFTs. So till tomorrow.